a disconnected dad, and an angry granddaughter. Join us for this special Q&A edition of Family Vision. Hi, Rob Rienow here with Visionary Family Ministries alongside my wonderful wife, Amy.
Happy New Year. It is really great to be starting 2023 back in the studio, but I have to admit that it is a struggle for me to come back from the Christmas break. I mean, I don't know what it is, but I really have a hard time getting back into the regular routine of things. So this is actually really helpful for us to get back in the studio because it's sort of reminding me I have to start my real life now.
But we had a great Christmas.
We did. We had a lot of sickness.
Had our adult kids back, passed a lot of sickness around.
Yes, but it felt
Granddaughter
normal.
Avi was the star.
Yeah, we went to winter camp up at Camp Forest Springs and had a great time. And yes, but we're now trying to really hit the 2023 with all of our...
School starts February 1st, so we have to ramp up for that.
Stop. You always say that, and only homeschoolers understand that joke. It takes a long time when you homeschool because there's no hard starts, so you have to kind of make your own start. So that's why he was joking about February 1st. But anyway.
Well, today and next week, we are going to do a couple special Q&A editions of the podcast. At our conferences, through our ministry and email and just life with our friends, we always get a lot of questions about marriage and faith and family. So we've taken a few of those questions. We're going to talk about 2 today and 3 in next week's episode. But before we jump in, friends in Texas, especially in the Dallas area, want to invite you to our next Visionary Family Conference. It's going to be at Wellspring Church in North Richland Hills, Sunday, January 29th. I'll be there with my boys, Ray and Rush, for a great day of ministry, and you can learn all about that event and being a part of it at the event page on our website at visionaryfam.com. Okay, first question comes from a mom in Texas. She says, my husband does not help when it comes to discipline situations with the kids. The kids are starting to become more rebellious with me, and I think it's because I'm the one confronting them on their bad behavior. I'm feeling exhausted and discouraged. How can I talk to my husband about this in a way that might help us work better as a team? So, mom question, you're first.
Yeah, that is a really good question. And when I saw that phrase, I'm feeling exhausted and discouraged, I totally relate with that. And I think that sometimes because we are in ministry and I'm married to Mr. Wonderful Family Ministry,
thank you, sweetheart,
that a lot of women may not understand how much I can connect with this question.
Yeah, I was wondering if she lived in our house asking this question. Right. Did you submit this question?
I didn't, but it very much sounded like me.
I'm going to have to pay attention to where these questions are coming from.
You really are. Because I did feel like when I read the question, like this person was reading my own heart. Because even though Rob caught this vision of family discipleship and family worship, I mean, I was married to a pastor who started not only at a busy pastor life, but travel schedule. So a lot of my parenting years, I was doing it kind of on a lot of this discipline situations on my own, partly because of Rob's schedule, partly because that was just, I was just the one hands-on the front lines a lot more. So therefore it sort of fell into my lap. And I very much relate with that feeling of exhausted and discouraged and often feeling like I was doing what I would say was most of the heavy lifting with all of the discipline situations. So first of all, I wanted to start with that it's a very common situation, and I understand the feeling of discouragement and exhaustion, and yes, it is something you need to talk to your husband about. But let me just give you some things not to do. Is often I would overreact in the middle of a situation. I can remember many calls to Rob when he was on the road where I was just like at the end of my rope, and I would say, okay, this is done. This is not happening anymore. We cannot do this anymore. I mean, and just really taking it to the extreme. And when you kind of get in that exhausted, discouraged mode, it's really easy to only see the negative. And it was really easy for me to kind of get into a tunnel of Rob doesn't do this, Rob doesn't do this, Rob doesn't do this, Rob doesn't do this. And that would become kind of my radar, so that all I was seeing was all the things that Rob wasn't doing and really missing what he was doing. So it is helpful. I'm not saying you're not going to have those moments, or Rob was gracious in handling those phone calls on the road in particular. But I do think it's good to just take a step back from the emotion and kind of analyze and really focus on the things that your husband is doing well before you go into a serious conversation, so that you're kind of reminding yourself that you have to focus on all of the positives and all of the things that you really want to be thankful for. This, you wrote in your question that we could work better as a team. And that was probably when we went to counseling, and this is going to be going into my next step, is, we got to the point where we really did have to seek counseling for this issue, because that was exactly how I felt. And I think I would sit in that counseling office and be like, I just don't feel like we're on the same team. And Rob is telling me that we're on the same team, but basically the everyday life does not make me feel like we're on the same team. So we did need to get help to do that. The other thing I would say is that when you do plead and get your husband more on board with working together on these discipline situations, one of the most challenging things is that your husband may not handle it the way that you would like to handle it, or the way that you wish that he would handle it. So now you've got another issue where, yes, your husband is entering into these situations, but you would like to direct how that situation is going to go. Basically, you want him to do what you think should be done.
You want him to lead, but really,
not really.
You want
sort
him to lead
of,
the way you
kind of, right?
Want him to lead.
Right. You want him to learn. That's what you want from you. So the reality is, there is a level where you do want to learn from each other. And I think when we started entering counseling and getting him more on the team, I'm learning things from him and he's learning things from me. And at the end of the day, I probably still do a lot more of the heavy lifting on the discipline, just because that's the way the roles go in our home. But I have learned very much that this is not a one-time process. This is an ongoing discussion that you need to have with your husband. So the key here really is learning how to have those discussions in a productive, positive way. So you're not just coming in with the attack, but you're really wanting to learn from each other and grow and being a team in discipline issues.
I think part of it for me is I'm a people pleaser. I want Amy happy. I want the kids happy. And when you have bad behavior, you have a discipline situation or a situation where you need to deliver consequences, there's going to be people that are unhappy. Kids might be angry with you. They're frustrated. I'm frustrated. So as a people pleaser, those are difficult emotional situations for me. And like Amy said, sometimes this pattern happens simply because in this case, Amy just may be on the front lines more. You're home with the kids more than I am, so you're going to be dealing with that stuff. But one thing I think that you've done that really helps me and helps us work more as a team is when there is, and this is not the little stuff, maybe things that are bigger or a bigger concern, you coming to me and say, hey, we've got this situation. Here's what happened today. I really want to work with you on this. Can we talk about it and come up with a game plan together? And I'm able to hear and listen. Okay, I need to engage and work with you. And that's just super helpful for me.
Yeah, and I would also add that we've gone through seasons where we can kind of identify. You specifically talked about the kids getting kind of upset or discouraged with you because you're doing the heavy lifting. There's been times where I've said, okay, especially with my girls in the high school years, I've had to really pull Rob aside and say, please take the lead here, because I can't, it is hurting our relationship. I can't be the one to always bring up the clothing issue or whatever the issue is that's causing a lot of tension, and just ask him very specifically and directly. And when I give him that kind of direction on one clear issue or with one kid, I think that really helps our husbands, because then they don't feel quite so overwhelmed. They kind of have a specific game plan. I need to pay attention to this dynamic, and I need to be the one to really move into that kind of heavy lifter position. So I hope that helps you. Again, it's like an ongoing marriage thing. We certainly don't have it completely solved, but be encouraged that it can get better. And even when Rob was saying about being a people pleaser and how that affected his discipline. I mean, that took a long time for you to, right? Kind of even come
just
into
even understand that.
self-awareness. It does take a long time, and that's okay.
Yeah. All right, what's our next question?
So the next question comes from a grandfather. My daughter went through a difficult divorce 3 years ago. She and my granddaughter, who is now 12 years old, moved in with me and my wife. The first 2 years with them back home went pretty well, but my granddaughter is now often angry and irritable with me. She even seems annoyed when I try to pray with her. Why is this happening, and what can I do to help her?
Well, it's a great question, and I'm sorry that you're having to navigate this. I'm sure it's very hurtful for you, feeling this, what has to come across for you as rejection from your granddaughter right now. But backing up into this whole situation, I think the first thing that's so critical is to understand that God has given you as a grandfather and a father, because your daughter is back at home with you right now, but given you as a grandfather a very special mission and a very special calling in your daughter and granddaughter's life. Obviously, this was not Plan A, okay? Plan A was, at this point, they would be living somewhere else and thriving in their family. But because of the things that have happened, your daughter and granddaughter are now back with you. So God's given you this very special calling as the spiritual patriarch of the family, and you want to recognize it as a calling from God and accept it and say, all right, Lord, you've given me this mission. You've put these souls into my care, this special season of care for my daughter and for my granddaughter, and I accept the mission. Now, you said something interesting in your question. You talked about that when they first moved in with you, the relationship with your granddaughter was pretty good and you were pretty close. And now, more recently, at the 3-year mark, she's starting to exhibit some anger and bitterness toward you. As hurtful as that is, I would tell you that it is a very normal pattern. An illustration that we share a lot when it comes to family trauma and understanding emotions and anger that come out as it relates to family trauma. If you get a small injury, even like a paper cut or something like that, it really, really hurts. But if you talk to like soldiers on a battlefield and they step on a landmine and get their foot blown off and they crawl their way back to a foxhole, you interview those soldiers and you ask them, what did it feel like in the moment that mine went off? And very consistently, they'll say, I didn't feel a thing in the moment. And the reason for that is your body has this extraordinary gift that if you experience a major trauma, all the pain sensors shut off. It numbs you out.
Right.
Why? Because you have to get back to the foxhole.
Right.
If you felt all that pain, you could not function. Now, the next day, the next month, the next year, as that soldier is healing, that thing is going to hurt a lot. And all that pain is going to be a part of the healing process. So I can remember when my parents were getting divorced. I was 15 years old and 13, 14, 15, leading up to their divorce. Obviously, it was a traumatic time. But if people asked me, and a lot of people did, Rob, how are you feeling? Fine. You angry? No. You upset? No. I was numb. God was giving me a gift of numbness so I could function, so I could get up, so I could go to school, so I could go to sports. Now, when God was ready for me to start facing into the healing process of this major, major trauma, I had lots of pain and lots of anger. So what I would encourage you with is that for you to understand this process, which is what is happening right now with your granddaughter's pain and anger, is the Lord saying to her and to you, it's time to start facing into the healing process of this trauma that you've gone through.
Yeah, and just going off of that, is in doing counseling with many people, I'd often say that, pain is the motivator. So it is the pain that gets people into the healing process, and it's the pain that gets people into realizing that they need help. So Rob said that not only is this a normal phase that your granddaughter's going through, but I would also add that this is a very good thing that she is pushing you away or having these feelings with you, because basically that is saying that you are the safe person or one of the safe people in her life, because she's not going to be...
Well, what do you mean? I don't think that makes a lot of sense to people. Like, if he's the safe person, right, he obviously loves her, she's welcomed her home, she's treated her wonderfully. Why would she be angry at him?
Because those negative emotions come out in the closest of relationships. So the reality is she is not going to feel safe enough to let that anger come out in her school relationships or her friendship relationships because she knows that those relationships are vulnerable. And she knows that if she lets all of that come out in those relationships, she's at risk of losing those relationships. And so there's a part of her that is dealing with all of this negativity and all of this hurt, anger, and hopelessness, discouragement, rejection, probably herself, feelings of rejection herself. So she has to find a place for these things to come out, and they feel safe coming out at home with grandfather because she has confidence that this relationship can handle it.
If you think about what this girl's gone through, she's gone through an incredible season of instability, which creates all sorts of fear and anger. And part of the healing process is for her now to have many years in a row of experiencing stability, someone who is consistent, someone who loves her, someone who cares for her. And I like to think about the testimony that God wants to bring out of something later. So what I would love to hear from your granddaughter, she's 12 now, when she's 22, and she's sharing her story, that she would share something like, I went through this incredibly painful time of my parents' divorce and all the fear and all the anger, and someone that God used to keep me close to him and see me through it was my grandfather. He took us into our home. He loved me. He stuck with me. I remember when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, I treated him horribly. And he never turned his back on me, and he stuck with me, and I'm so thankful for my grandfather. That's the kind of testimony. So you have to kind of keep in mind the vision of a testimony like that and continue to pursue it.
And let me just add to that even if she had not gone through any trauma, let's just talk about a 12-year-old girl in that season of her life. And I rejected my dad a lot at that time. I mean, you basically have become, as the grandfather, the new father figure in her home. So that is a natural progression too. Even if there was no trauma, girls are going through that phase of life, that transition of girlhood to womanhood, and it's very normal for girls to be rejecting those, especially their fathers at that time as well. Because she's going through just a life transition that's difficult regardless of the trauma. So you have to kind of expect for these phases to be a part of your life right now.
Right. Well, we have a resource that can help any parent, any grandparent, if you're navigating anger in the home, in your child, in your teenager, in yourself. It's an MP3 seminar that we do for families. It's called Helping Your Teen Find Freedom from Anger. You can get it for free at visionaryfam.com/freedom. visionaryfam.com/freedom. That's a free MP3 that'll do a deep dive into navigating these struggles that we all have with anger in our homes. Well, we hope you join us next time. We're going to do another special Q&A episode. And we always love to hear from you. Maybe you would like to have a question shared on a future podcast. You can always email us, podcast@visionaryfam.com. That's podcast@visionaryfam.com. And God loves your family. We love your family. And we're looking forward to our next time with you on Family Vision. It means so much to us to have you be a part of the Family Vision community. If this episode was meaningful for you, would you share it with a friend, with a family member? You can actually partner with us to bring hope and help to families around the world.
We are praying that Family Vision is a blessing to you and your family. So thank you for joining us here.
And we look forward to our next time together.